you, Father Olson, Father Kelly, Reverend Fathers, any honored guests, and my dear brothers. When I was a new man, I heard my first priest hero talk in the old chapel, and I remember thinking to myself, I know exactly who I'm going to pick when I give this talk someday as a senior. And so my priest hero is Father Paul Guzman, a priest for the Archdiocese of Chicago and a chaplain for the United States Navy. So Father Paul was assigned to my parish when I was in 6th grade, and that was just when I started altar serving. So I used to always serve for him, and I was struck by how reverently he celebrated the Mass and how slowly he purified the vessels. So I would remember kneeling in the pews, waiting as a server to go up there and take the chalice from him, and he was just slowly purifying it and allowed everyone time to pray. And I was so impacted by that because I was like, wow, this is real. He is so devoted to the Eucharist and really loves what he does. And so his witness made me want to learn more about the faith and the priesthood. And one day he came to me and he said, have you ever thought about being a priest? And at that time I hadn't. He was the first person in my life to ever say, have you thought about this? And it was a real invitation to discernment. And it was from there that he introduced me to the Quigley Scholars Program in Chicago, which is a wonderful program for high school men to discern what it means to be a priest. And it was there that I fell in love with the seminary and fell in love with discernment of the priesthood and what that meant. And I can honestly say that it was Father Paul who really began to sow that first seed of the vocation of the priesthood. His generosity did not stop. When I was in high school, he was relocated to a different parish in Chicago and then called upon by the U.S. Navy to serve. He was in his 60s at the time, and so he had to go through boot camp. So if we have a hard time doing push-ups when we miss our chores, just think about that, 60 years old, doing push-ups, getting through boot camp. And he was shipped off to Syria, and he spent a lot of time there, and he served with the Special Forces units and the Marine Corps, and he had to do some really hard things. Most of his days he spent traveling around in a Humvee just to go base to base to celebrate the sacraments for the men. And his job there was to bring light into the darkness. I remember when he returned back from his deployment, he was having dinner with my family, and he was talking about how there was these massive sand spiders in Syria, and he showed us a picture of them. They were horrible. They just looked horrifying. And he's like, yeah, so we were just sleeping in tents, and these things were crawling all around, but it's okay, God took care of it. And so, that's the kind of man Father Paul was, I think to myself, in my 20s, what am I willing to do, right? And then I think in my 30s, 40s, 50s. In my 60s, would I really want to go lay in the desert in Syria with spiders? Probably not, right? But God asked him to do something, and he did it. And I remember one of the most impactful moments that Father Paul had on myself and my family was when my grandfather passed away when I was in high school. He was back from a deployment at the time, and my grandfather was a veteran for the Vietnam War, and the burial was just south of Joliet at the National Cemetery. And I remember it was Father Paul's day off from the parish he was assigned to up in Chicago. Yet he took the day to drive about 2 hours just to say the prayers for the burial and spent the whole rest of the day with my family. And that had a huge impact because we felt honored and loved and really received into the love of the Father. And it was there that I witnessed his priesthood. And he taught me an important lesson about how when a death happens, you drop everything and you go and you be with that family and you love them and you care for them in that way. And Father Paul is a major part of the reason why I'm standing here today. He's inspired me to be who I am, and I'm truly blessed and honored to have him in my life. For Father Paul's courageousness and generosity in serving the people of God, I say, praise be Jesus Christ. Amen.